Welcome to episode 42 of the Unstoppable Podcast. My name is Dan J. Gregory, and I am committed to hunting down the secrets of business mastery and human performance. My goal for the Unstoppable Podcast is to share insights from some of the most successful entrepreneurs, inspiring thought leaders, world-class athletes, and prominent celebrities to help you to become unstoppable in business and life. Each week I'll be bringing you a new interview with an inspiring person and sharing my own results as I pursue the answers to the question, how can I create the ultimate edge in my business, make a significant impact, and live an extraordinary life? Hello and welcome to episode 42 of the Unstoppable Podcast. And yes, you've guessed it from the title, I am going there. A very controversial subject and one fraught with mixed emotion. Today, I'm going to be giving my perspective on the EU referendum, and if you're not from the UK, I still strongly recommend that you take a listen right to the end of the show because I share a number of valuable insights into how you can create personal change in your own life. So given the heat around this subject, I'm mentally braced for an onslaught of discussion following the show, so please feel free to join the discussion after the episode over at www.danjgregory.com/42, where you'll find all of the show notes. Last week in episode 40, I shared how you can change your life by raising your standards, and I've already heard some amazing stories from listeners who have implemented some of those lessons from that show. And in episode 41 last Thursday, I shared part 1 of my mega business series where I interviewed Daryl Urbanski on the components required to build a 7-figure automated business. The episode was packed full of profound life insights and business strategies, so please be sure to go back and take a listen if you haven't done so already. Finally, before we dive into this episode, as I mentioned last week, as I move towards the key milestone of 50 episodes, I'm evaluating the format of the Monday and Thursday shows. So if you have any feedback, suggestions, or thoughts about what you'd like to see included or the type of guest you'd love to hear from, then please do get in touch over on the blog at danjgregory.com. All right, it's time to dive into the episode, kicking off as always with the quote of the week, and I've selected one very pertinent to the content within today's show. Man is the master of thought, the molder of character, and the maker and shaper of condition, environment, and destiny. James Allen from his book, As a Man Thinketh. Now, before we jump into my thoughts on Brexit, the EU referendum, and how we can create change in our own lives, first, I will share my own top takeaways from part 1 of the Mega Business series with Daryl Urbanski, and I've selected 5 powers as my unique insights from the show. So, number 1, the power of mastery. Daryl quoted Bruce Lee, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." And this is all about the concept of mastery and becoming a master of what you do. Finding your superpower, your area of mastery, is an evolving journey where your superpower only really reveals itself through engagement. So by taking massive action and being open-minded enough to try new things, you will find your superpower. And I'm currently still searching for my area of mastery. There's lots of things involved in my business that I'm really proud of, and there's lots of things that I'm working on skill-wise to improve. But I'm yet to find my one single thing, or at least concretely one single thing that I want to be known for going forward, and one area of skill, one area of craft that I want to build to be the forefront of my brand and my business. There's lots of things it could be, whether it's speaking, live events, podcasting, coaching. I just want to find my one area of mastery and really become world class in that area. So know that if you're listening to this, to find your own area of mastery, your own superpower, the more action you take, the more you engage in with what you do, and the more aware you are of where you stand right now, the more likely you are to find your own area of mastery. But the key is, once you find it, is to really go 100% all in and become the very best version of you in that area. Number 2, the power of self-awareness. Daryl talked about his 5-minute daily journal where he wrote down 3 things that he's grateful for, 3 of his daily goals, and he wrote down his personal affirmations. And he said, with awareness, with willpower, proper routines and rituals compounded over time, you can achieve anything that you want. So I've always used a daily journal, and it's been an incredibly powerful and profound exercise that has created massive change in my own life and business. But over the last quarter, it's a habit that's slipped. I've replaced the habit with different activities, but it's something that I want to bring back. It's a really powerful exercise. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. So if you're not already completing a daily journal, I strongly encourage you to do so. And over the next few weeks, I'm sure I'll be sharing my template that I'll be using for my own 5-minute journal. But if you're not journaling already, give it a go. The first thing in the morning, get a book out, a pen, and write down what you're grateful for, your goals, your personal affirmations, and what's on your mind. Number 3, the power of lifestyle design. Daryl said, have a day-to-day life that you can live forever. This is all about deciding what your perfect day looks like. What's the timeline from the moment you get out of bed to the moment you go back to bed? And this, for me, is all about getting out of the warp. It's very easy when you're focused on your goals and priorities just to be 100% laser focused, head down, blinkers on, and forget to live the life how you want to live it on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. You see, in life, you can either surf the wave or be taken by the tide. And at times, as I said in the last week's episode, it's easy to end up back in the tide. So right now, going forward, thinking about Q3, I'm thinking about how do I want to live each day and create a life by design. And to be honest, often when we look at how we want to live our life on a day-to-day basis, we may not be that far away, and it's just those millimeter shifts or those centimeter shifts, whatever you want to use, to create real change in the way you experience life on a day-to-day basis. So that's an exercise I'll be doing going into the next quarter. I strongly encourage you to do the same. And again, I'll be sharing my own experiences of this as we progress through the podcast. Number 4, the power of one. Now, Daryl spoke about this in the terms of client experience end to end and thinking about just one customer as a representation of your entire customer base and what their overall customer experience is like, and storyboarding the entire customer journey like a walk through a theme park from when you walk in the front door and then you go and explore the park. So, for example, in business, it could be how you capture leads and then how you go on to make your offer and how then you take care of your customers. So for me, as I launch my new signature product, this is incredibly important. How do I map out the journey from you guys listening to the podcast, for example, into the webinar funnel that I've put together, into the product and into the results that the customers create through that product? I want to map out that journey of one so that I create a really compelling environment right from the first stop to the last stop in that journey. I thought that's a really powerful lesson. And part 5, the power of team. I realized more and more that I cannot do it all myself. I've interviewed plenty of entrepreneurs that have achieved 6, 7, 8 figures, and they've done it up to a point by themselves, but it gets to a point where they need to build a team. And for me, going into the next quarter, I certainly need to start building my team, whether it's a virtual assistant, someone to support me on the technical side, the marketing side, on the podcast technicality side. There's so much that I'm doing right now that's outside of my zone of genius or my superpower, my area of mastery, that I need to take those things off my plate. So for you guys listening to the show, what are you working on right now that you could outsource, that you could automate, that you could eliminate, that you could systemize? How can you use the power of team to help you build your business? What are you doing right now that doesn't need to be done by you? And back in my corporate days, when I finally left, the final month, I was described as having the sliding desk syndrome because everything on my desk got delegated, eliminated, or systemized. And it was probably the most productive and powerful month I ever had because I finally let go of all the things that I didn't need to be doing. So think about what's going on in your business, your life right now. How can you outsource? How can you get help from other people? And when I say team, it doesn't have to be paid employees. Who around you can help you and support you in creating your goals? All right. Without further ado, it's time to let the cat out of the bag and share my thoughts on Brexit, the EU referendum. Let's get into it. Shock, fear, anger, dismay, resentment, shame, rage, blame. These are just some of the words that I've heard many people use to describe their feelings towards the outcome of the EU referendum. The United Kingdom. Is it one nation? The EU referendum shows that Britain is not one nation, but rather a starkly divided and fragmented nation. And statistically, the divide amongst the voters has been shown to be as much about socio-economic class as it is about generation. The polls show that those aged below 50 voted conclusively to remain in the EU, yet those above 50 significantly outweighed them and voted to leave. And whilst, of course, there were many exceptions amongst the voting population, all of the data shows that the referendum was a battle of the old versus the young, the elite versus the working classes, those with higher education versus those without, the prosperous Britain versus the left behind Britain, those who embrace globalization, multiculturalism, and diversity versus those who fear that a nation has lost control of its identity and its borders. And the issue of migration was used to galvanize supporters and was undoubtedly one of the key drivers of the vote. And unfortunately, xenophobia rose to the surface during the process of this referendum, and there was a sense of exclusion, racism, and hatred that could be felt by disaffected pockets of the nation, which really added to the sense of a divided country. The EU referendum, however, did not create these divisions or these prejudices, but it has exposed a huge underbelly of the disenchanted within the UK who feel let down and neglected by successive governments. The referendum highlighted the disconnect between the politics and the people, the establishment against the person on the street. So it is no great shock to find that so many voters failed to listen to the advice of the economists, the politicians, and the bankers. All trust has been lost. And like perhaps most other countries in the world, Britain has been frustrated by a decade of economic turmoil, and it's fueled by fear and ignorance. The fear reached such a level that campaigners urged supporters to use pens on the ballot sheets instead of pencils, claiming that pencils provided the opportunity for votes to be erased and changed afterwards. And the ignorance reached such a level that the top 5 Google searches post-referendum included, "What is the EU?" and "What countries are in the EU?" This shows that people didn't understand the EU, yet many turned out to cast a vote without full information or understanding the potential consequences. And what of the consequences? Within hours, the pound tumbled to its lowest level for 31 years. $2 trillion was wiped off global share prices as the shockwave swept around the world. And the economic and political environment in the UK has been left in turmoil. An ununited kingdom that shares common territory but no common vision or common values. This was not a vote to leave the EU. This was a vote for change. The people want change for themselves, and they want change when it comes to how nations and territories operate both politically and economically. So whether this vote was the right way to create change, only time will tell. And whilst the initial economic and political reaction has been traumatic, the reality is we don't really know what the future will hold. This is uncharted territory. But why did this happen, and what can we learn from this? Well, human psychology shows that when people make decisions, we all do so based first upon our emotions, and then we back up our decisions with logic. The voting in the EU referendum is no exception to this. The vote was won based upon feelings versus facts and emotions versus logic. Whenever you make a decision based upon how you feel, you will always look for the supporting logical evidence to back up your decision. So whether you voted Remain or Leave, you will have found plenty of logical reasoning to justify your own personal decision. You could have had all the evidence in the world to show that leaving the EU could have dire consequences. But for those who voted for change, they did so because they feel angry, frustrated, isolated, and powerless to create change. And logically, many wanted someone to blame for the position that they find themselves in, and immigration politicians in the EU were made scapegoats. But I understand the pain, I understand the frustration, I understand the desire for change, and I understand the suffering. The formula for suffering is where your current life conditions do not equal your blueprint and where you feel helpless to create change. And your blueprint, by the way, is your long-term expectation for how life is supposed to be for you. It's how you perceive how life should be. So if what you're experiencing right now does not meet that expectation of how you believe life should be, you're going to be feeling unhappily. And at the same time, if you feel powerless to create change, then you will feel suffering. And I believe this is what we've just witnessed as the events have unfolded in Britain. People are desperate for change and they've had enough. The reality is that many territories across the UK have seen little economic progress since the end of the Industrial Revolution, and they have failed to adapt to the globalization and digitalization of the modern world. So it's no wonder why life conditions do not match the life blueprint for those who voted for change, you can very simply understand how and why they are feeling a sense of suffering. And at this level of pain, frustration, and suffering, there are only three ways out. And herein lies the first problem. The first way out of suffering is blame. You can blame the events of the world. You can blame others. You can blame the past. You can blame the government for failing to be aware of the extent of the problems that you are facing. You can blame immigration. You can blame the politicians. You can blame the EU. The Remain voters can blame the Leave voters. The young can blame the old. The poor can blame the rich, or vice versa. The problem is, blame never works. We blame because we need to explain why things in our lives aren't where we want them to be. And it becomes our story. The story that you tell yourself based upon what is happening around you is the real problem. Whether it's you lost your job to someone else from outside your country, or perhaps you had to wait for hours at the doctor's surgery, or your town is overcrowded or under-resourced or underdeveloped, or perhaps you believe that people should have listened to the experts. Even if your story is 100% true, when you blame your current life experiences on outside circumstances, it reinforces the idea that the outside world controls you and that you do not have control over your inner world. The problem is never the problem. The real problem is your story about the problem. And the truth is, we all play a role in what happens in our lives, no matter how much we may want to believe it's someone else's fault. So however you voted, wherever you live in the world, whether Brexit has any relevance to you at all, when you continue in any way to blame outside events, people, or circumstances for your own life conditions, you become entrenched in the idea that you are not capable of improving your life. Blame effectively keeps you stuck. So rather than blame, the second way to create real change or to end your own personal suffering is to change your own life conditions. This is the real key to change. To take personal responsibility and proactively change your own life conditions. To have personal responsibility is to get focused about what it is that you want and what you don't want, and then instigate change. When something in your life isn't the way that you want it, that does not mean that things around you are all wrong. It means you have a great opportunity to make it right, and in doing so, you will learn, grow, and expand. Think about not what happened or what someone could have done, but what you can do differently, starting right now. It's not your life conditions that shape your life, it's the decisions that you make. There are 5 core decisions that will change your life. Number 1, decide what you want. What is your goal? What is your aim? What is your purpose? What do you really want? Number 2, decide what it all means. What is the meaning that you give to your life? How will you interpret the events that unfold around you? Number 3, what are you going to focus on? Where your attention goes, energy flows. Number 4, what is your attitude going to be? You can live in the positive or you can live in the negative. You can be joyful or you can be sad. You can be upbeat or you can be down. How do you want to feel and how do you want to be seen in this world? Number 5, what are you going to do? What action are you going to take? If you take no action, you have no progress. The key to personal responsibility is to take consistent, purposeful action. And then the final way out of suffering or to create real change is to, number 3, change your blueprint and update your map of the world. What is the blueprint that you want to live by? What is the expectation that you have for how your life should be? How do you want to see the world? If the world has changed around you, will you change with it? How will you choose to see the people around you? How will you choose to see your environment? How will you choose to see your nation? How will you choose to see the world? To create lasting change, you must change your story. When you change your story about how life is supposed to be, you change your life. And I personally feel that when we take more personal responsibility for our own lives, life expands. End the blame game now. And as Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world, whether that's in your own household, your community, your nation, or the world over. This is your opportunity to become a role model for change. When you take personal responsibility for your own life conditions and your life blueprint, your map of the world, your life will change. So how do you want to see the world now? Your unstoppable challenge this week is to take stock of your own personal life circumstances and your life blueprint and make some important decisions to take control of your own future. Ask yourself the 5 key questions for change. What do you want? What does life mean to you? What are you going to focus on? What is your attitude going to be? And most importantly, what are you going to do? For those in the United Kingdom, please remember that although our nation has entered into uncharted territory, some of the greatest discoveries of all time were made by courageous explorers who dared to enter into unknown waters. And remember, when you take personal responsibility, the pen is in your hand to write the script to your own story. And for all the listeners, we may all live in turbulent times, but we always have the choice to act out of love or to act out of fear. So choose to live from love to create a brighter now. And before we tune out, for all of those who want to take personal responsibility economically for yourself, I implore you to check out my latest webinar where I share 5 key steps to building a phenomenal online business. And you can get instant access right now by logging on to www.danjgregory.com/webinar. Head over there now and sign up for this amazing 90-minute training session and prepare to take charge of your own destiny and create your own economy by building a truly epic business that makes a difference in this world. Now, before we sign off, coming up this week on Thursday in part 2 of the Mega Business Series, you will hear from media buying genius Justin Brooke. Justin got his start just 8 years ago with $60 in a Google AdWords advertising account and turned it into 6 figures and beyond since then. In the forthcoming episode, you'll learn how to get significant volumes of traffic to your business, and the episode is simply packed full of business and life lessons. So be sure to subscribe to the Unstoppable podcast and make sure you tune into the show on Thursday. That is all for now. Until next time, go out there, unleash your greatness, build your empire, make your impact, and live your ultimate life. You are unstoppable.